Well, good morning, John. It's good to see you. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. The market has just closed. Last night, we got a rally for the ages on Wall Street in response to Donald Trump's victory in the US elections. John, it's been an exciting 24 hours. We've seen some big moves in the US. Not such big moves in Australia, but we'll get to that later. What did you make of the US election results and particularly the market response? They really seem to love what they saw.
We should say that in the last 2 weeks, it became less obvious that Trump would win with the resounding way he did. I think when we talked a month or so ago, I think we were both of the view, based on observations of betting markets, and which really tells the tale, that there was quite a strong belief that Trump would win and could win both houses. And then that seemed to get waylaid by a lot of commentary in the press that the polls were showing a resurgence by the Democrats, and the popular vote would go to the Democrats, and probably the House of Reps would go to the Democrats. I mean, there was so much. You think about the last week or so in particular, the commentary coming out of America, which put doubt, if it put doubt in our mind, I think it put doubt in the stock market's mind that this was going to be too close to call, and we could have, this going on for a week before they counted votes. And the opposite happened. It was all over in a few hours.
Yeah.
And I think if there were investors, or let's call them traders, who were sceptical, they came charging into the market last night to reset their investments based on a Trump victory. Now, whether it's overdone, time will tell. I suspect it is, because the American market is fairly pumped up. But there's no doubt that if Trump follows through on particularly his tax regime, his tax proposals, then that's positive for earnings in America, and they need earnings growth, so they'll get it through tax cuts. So that's why the market's rallying.
Yeah, so the market response is really interesting. The US dollar has been strong in advance of a Trump victory. Trump's other signature, policies have emphasized deregulation, which tends to be good for the financial sector and the banks. And I think the IT sector was worried about regulation, so there was some relief in IT stocks. He's also spoken, obviously, about tariffs. The problem there, and also with controlling illegal migrants into the country, the problem there is that tariffs and reducing the number of migrants could both be quite inflationary. So we've seen a negative response in the bond market. There wasn't much discussion about federal debt levels or fiscal deficits. None of that was in any of the speeches I ever watched. Is the bond market, the policeman on the street corners, going to keep them in line, John?
My view, and I've expressed this in the letter, which I guess people will access the next few weeks, my conclusions are that the bond market, if it does start pushing up the cost of debt to the American government as it rolls over tens of trillions of dollars of debt, and presentations I'm giving and as well are disclosing the fact that the current cost of debt in America through the bond market is around 2.5%. That's the average cost. Yet we know the whole bond yield curve is sitting 2% above that. So if the American debt is rolled into current market rates, or if those market yields go higher in the bond market, then American government is going to be confronted with a significant interest rate bill. So I take your point. The bond market may be the policeman on the corner, but if they start getting out of control, I'm adamant that the Central Bank of America will have to intervene with quantitative easing and try and buy the bond market, push the yield down. And one thing we will have with Trump, I suspect, is a new federal chairman and probably new appointees to the Federal Reserve Board. And I think the influence of Trump, his administration, Treasury over the Federal Reserve, given the amount of debt, will become significant. So I'm going to watch with interest what happens in 2025 when appointees are made to these significant positions in the financial Treasury and Federal Reserve.
Yeah. Well, I think Jay Powell's probably still got another year to go before his mandate runs out. But I kind of agree with you. I think Trump will want a yes man in the role. Later on tonight, in the US, the FOMC will be meeting to decide whether to reduce the official cash rate again. So at the end of September, they surprised us with a 50 basis point cut. The markets are now expecting a 25 basis point cut now, and then again in December. Does that accord with what you're thinking, or do you think that there's even a chance that they skip this cut altogether, with the bond market signaling that perhaps they've been too ready to take the pressure off inflation, and that because of the political developments, they might want to keep their powder a bit dry?
The cash rate does have some influence over the bond yield because that's the short end. And we've got a yield curve in America sitting at around 5% short and 4.5% long. So it's still a negative yield curve, which historically has said we're heading into recession, which we know this time it's not. So I do think the Federal Reserve will want to flatten that yield curve as soon as possible. They would be cognizant of the new potential change in policy, which may be inflationary. So I think what we'll see is continued interest rate cuts, but at a slower rate than expected in futures markets. So whether it means one cut before Christmas and then slower cuts in the year, I'm not quite sure. But I think there is, a case that America needs to get interest rates down. They're too high, but not aggressively. And the economy's doing fine. And with this stimulation coming from Trump, you'd have to be alert to that while we have the old Federal Reserve before we get the new one, so to speak. So it's a play out for the next 6 months. And Trump doesn't take control officially till January.
Yeah,
new administration's got to be sworn in and go through their hearings and all that nonsense. And so he won't really be in full throttle till about March.
No, that's right. And obviously he's made a big thing about increasing tariffs on China. If we start thinking of the implications for Australia here, I mean, China's our biggest trading partner. If they are, kind of frozen out of a lot of their exports to the US, is that going to have an effect on Australia? Does it expose us in some way, and particularly our commodity exports?
I think on the balance, it's not going to have a great effect. I think there's negatives and positives. We saw last time Trump put up tariffs in, I think it was the middle of 2018 when he eventually got round to it. It did slow the trade coming out of India. There's evidence for that. Sorry, out of China. However, China then reset other markets. So trade by China to the world went up as trade China to US went down, but the world went up faster. And on reflection, China might say you did us a favour by making us look at the rest of the world for export markets. Since then, we know China's been very active in the BRICS, development of BRICS with Russia, expanded that membership. India's in there. China obviously wants to see growth in other parts of the world outside America and the developed world. So I think they have policies in place to meet the challenges if there is issues with the American trade relationship. I think they're moving. And let's be clear, in 2018, I think about 18.5% of China exports went to America. Today, it's less than 14%. So there's already been a push down in the level of exports going to America. This may take it down another couple of notches, but I'm sure Trump, as a business guy, will get advice from business people in America. There will be some tariffs he won't put on essential Chinese components coming into America.
And hopefully Australia, through our strategic relationship with the US, will be in a position to negotiate some exemptions for our exports. Not that we export much to the United States. I think the US only accounts for about 4% of our exports. And in fact, we have a trade deficit with the US. So we should be one of the people that Trump, one of the countries that Trump likes. So,
yeah. Look, I think there's a growing impediment or need for Australia to redirect its trade focus to Asia. And if America is going to put up barriers, this really just, enforces that point. And I, in my presentations, which I'm giving one in Perth on Monday, so anyone watching that who's in Perth, please come along, and Adelaide on Wednesday. I'm making the point that Australia, indeed, the whole of the developed world, needs to engage more strongly with Asia, and particularly with India. Australia's got a great opportunity to build out its trade relationships with true growth partners. We all love America. We love the fact that it's full of entrepreneurs and industrialists, and it performs fantastically and creates great companies. But there is an unsavoury aspect to it in terms of its debt load and its distribution of wealth, which we have to be aware of. And I don't see Trump really. He may continue the entrepreneur and the industrialist of America, but he won't close that gap. So that puts a question mark over the sustainability of the American economy. So I think we need to have much better trade relationships with non-American, non-US than worry about what's going on in the US.
So if I bring it back to the impact on Australia, you don't see the imposition of higher tariffs on China as necessarily adversely affecting our commodity exports. That's the question.
No. I don't. We've already had this played out in 2018, and it didn't have a dramatic effect. What will have a more dramatic effect on Australia if China unilaterally decides not to trade with us?
Yeah.
America deciding not to trade with China won't have a great effect on us, so long as we don't say stupid things to the Chinese. I mean, like, it'd be stupid for the Australian government to say it supports the American tariff regime. That would be a stupid thing to say. So hopefully we won't say that. And we just try to eke out our trade relationship with India and grow our trade relationship with emerging Asian economies. That would be where I'd be.
No, I asked the question because I think Warwick McKibben's in the Fin Review this morning with an article saying that Australia has exposure to, to American imposition on trade restrictions of China because of our close relationship with China. But anyway, let's put that aside. John, do you think that we have to have a federal election here in Australia? I think it's by September of next year, but it's more likely to be called in May. Do you think the odds of Labor losing to a coalition government have just increased over the last 24 hours? And what might that mean?
Well, look, I think we've said before, Paul, that incumbents everywhere are getting a protest vote.
Yeah.
And there's developments in Germany, which I'm reading about. Coalition breaking down there.
Yeah.
It's all about the cost of living and the cost of energy. So there is a worldwide protest vote against incumbent governments. So it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. If you're the government, you get a protest. So the Labor Party's up against it. I have a strong view that we're caught in this political trap where essential economic management should have occurred in terms of cost of living relief, should have occurred 2 years ago. Yeah. And yet the government decided to hold it up until an election year to try and get some votes. And I think it's quite clear that we're seeing that the voters, the householders, see through that nonsense. They want governments to be on top of issues all through the cycle. And I think there will be a protest vote against the Labor Party, and they've brought it on themselves by not being proactive in their management of the cost of living. So we'll see what happens, but I think you're right there. I think whether Labor loses power, but there will be a significant protest vote. Now, whether it goes to the Liberal Party or the Greens or Independents will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and at the same time, we're seeing still the numbers of migrants coming into the country, the student numbers and so on. still very, very high, despite what the government said about restricting the numbers. And we're also getting a lot of people coming in from New Zealand, because the New Zealand economy's effectively been in recession over the last 12 months. Do you think there could be, migration into the country could be an issue with high house prices, poor infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it defies logic. Who is responsible for the immigration policy of Australia? What are the numbers? Where are they coming from? How much capital do they come when they come here? And what trades or skills do they have? Where is the document? Where is the policy which outlines that? So, in my presentation, I did it today in Sydney. I just said to my clients, I said, well, who is responsible for stamping these immigration visas, or whatever they call them? I mean, there doesn't seem to be any full process. And it's almost, I'm sad to say, it's almost like the government is just trying to immigrate votes. That's if that's what's occurring, it's appalling. And it's not doing justice to Australia's economic potential. Yes, we do want to take the right immigrants, and there are compassionate grounds, but also there is economic grounds. And the economic grounds are numbers and skills and capital. If you don't cover those three bases outside humanitarian issues, you're doing the country a great disservice and loading us up with problems which will take a decade to fix, And we've seen the backlash in America. America, whether you like it or not, the American population does not like an open border with the South, where anyone can come in and cause whatever chaos they can. Now, again, it's a very sensitive issue, but the government of America had to take, the president and the vice president had to take, they were charged with fixing it. It was a political issue which was very clear to see, which they didn't fix. Australian government and the bureaucracy needs to be very careful about how they administer immigration policy, because it will become an election issue. Now, whether the Liberals can say that they handled it properly in the past is a debatable issue. I think Australia's immigration policy should be bipartisan. It shouldn't be left to bureaucracy to come up with thought bubbles.
Well, just in a further echo of American politics, I see that the Prime Minister has proposed a write-off of student debt, HECS debt, above a certain level. Again, that's very much the following the proposal that the Biden administration had done. Do you think that's a good idea, or is it just selectively buying off the voters?
Well, parts of it make sense. I mean, I think it's got to be means and asset tested, for God's sake. I mean, that's, it can favour some people who don't need assistance. So again, it's another thought bubble. It's another grab for votes. I understand why he's doing it, because he's annoyed so many people, and the students aren't happy at present, and they're swinging towards the Greens. He's got to get them back, and the policy would be adopted by the Greens. You can tell that they'd come up with that sort of idea. Let's just wipe off HECS debt. But who am I to say? Paul, I don't know where you came through, but I came through university in the late 70s and early 80s. I didn't pay for education, and I've paid back my fees in multitudes of tax. And maybe we don't think about it logically, and I agree. There is, for instance, I don't think some education should be charged or taxed. I mean, essential services where we need them, why would you charge nurses to get a nursing degree? I find it bizarre. Stuff like that. There needs to be, I keep on saying, it's just government or is this bipartisan? Don't leave it to bureaucracy. Bureaucracy has no idea, and they're not elected. So I think we do need, on a whole range of issues, the Australian Parliament needs a bipartisan approach, so it gets away from political argument and gets into proper economic policy settings. Well, some of it's good, some of it's bad, but we need to look after the next generation. We're making a real mess of this.
Well, John, we probably have to end it there. I do note that despite the very strong movement in the US markets, our market was quite restrained today. I mean, do you think that we made our big jump yesterday, or it's just different different factors applying?
Well, Paul, when the whole index goes up, it's really where we are. It's PE expansion.
Yeah.
It's just that the market has assessed that it wants to pay a higher multiple for the same earnings. Like nothing's changed overnight. There's been no earnings issue.
No.
So the revaluation, when that happens at this time of the year, it'll probably give it up fairly quickly. So I think we're stuck for a while. There's no reason for the Australian share market to rally on the back of America. You can have a feel-good rally, but that peters out fairly quickly. I don't think and the Australian market is very overweighted with banks.
Yeah.
Tell me what the good news on the banking sector is. Why should they trade at 20 times earnings? I'm not sure they should.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for their dividend, you probably wouldn't own them.
All right, John, I think we will have to leave it there. So just a reminder that you're going to be doing these presentations in Perth and Adelaide.
Yeah, Perth on Monday. So there'll be an invitation under this. It's pretty full, so please, if you're coming, sign up. And Adelaide on Wednesday morning. Again, fairly full, but we can take a few more there as well.
All right. Terrific, John. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week.
Great. See ya.